right now, so today as we muddle through and continue on into chapter 4 where we were, I think we left off last time on around page 81, and apologize, I did not have a chance to go back in there and play with Pixlr and the stuff that I did. It was a cluster last night. But I came in here this morning and I want to show you what happened to me, because I've never seen this before. I show this to John, mention it to Mike, but so I've got XAMPP up and running. So I went in and tried to start up Joomla. All right, and this is what I get. It doesn't look at all like it looked the other day. And when I go into the administrator side, I get this. The menus are still up here, but I've got to click there to get them. I have never seen that before. All right, you understand what I'm saying to you? And I've been trying to Google it, and I know, John, you said the one you found. I found one that was even older than yours. It was 2005, but I tried doing the stuff that was in it anyway, and it didn't change anything. Yeah, it is. It's responsive now is what it is, basically, but it's responsive where it's not expanding. It's contracted, and it's staying in a contracted form. I've not seen that before. Yeah. And I'm not sure why it's doing that. I don't even know how to set it to mobile. I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying is, sure, it's possible, but I don't even know how to do that. So that's one that I guess to look up. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, I want to walk you through most of the stuff that's in the rest of the chapter, give you some time to work on it, and then hopefully I can fix it. All right? What they want you to do next here on page 81 in your book, again, I'm not going to run through it like I said, as they mention, is to go to extensions, go to template manager, make sure, as it says right here, that you're at the ProStar copy. All right, so make sure, because they ask you to change the CSS, and if you change it, but you change it on the ProStar and not the ProStar copy, you're not going to see it on the one you're working with, and you'll have changed the template, so to speak, the one you're going to use. They want you to go in there, and as it says, go to Details and Files, click Edit CSS, and you'll see there's a folder in there, a CSS folder, and then you click on template.css, and there literally is a CSS file. Where you put this isn't exactly going to matter. They suggest you go right up to the top and add that. Now, I don't think this is a misstatement by me, that you should be able to look at that and all that stuff should make sense. And we talked a little bit about this last time, changing the font color, the font size, the font weight, putting padding in, because the idea behind that is after you put in that, now if your logo looks something like this, putting in that padding is going to move the collectors of really bad art right underneath the C, if you followed their steps. All right. Then they say what just happened, and they talk about CSS. Again, I don't think we need to go over that page, because we all know what CSS is. All right. And the author mentions here, so again, I'm up to page 83, that this might not be a bad time to go in and just take a look at some of the settings in here. I'm going to give you some time to do that. I want mine, so if I'm showing you something, what I'm doing looks like what you're doing. Because I'm finding this, even though it's not a big thing, to have this thing set wider like this, it's driving me nuts. And when I'm trying to do things, I'm constantly clicking the wrong button. Right? And John even said, well, did you try doing something at home last night? I have not used this at home probably in a month. So whatever happened between Tuesday, when I got out of this, and today when I got back into it. All right. So we kind of have finished that step one. Again, I'm walking you through this stuff. Apologize, but that's just the way it's going to work today. Hopefully we can get this fixed. Step 2 out of those 3 steps was adding the content. And again, whether you use, even when I show you mine, I think you would all agree that as we look at it and I go back to the site, now at least, not a lot of content, right? So what they have you do next in here is they have you go in and start adding some content. Now, notice this. It says If you have experience designing static websites, you probably added new pages in 2 steps. You start with a new HTML content, then you add a link to that page. Well, that's nothing new. All right. So, for instance, when you start to create a navigation bar up at the top of your screen or down the side, a lot of times, let's say you're going to have 6 pages. All right. You're working on the home page, but the other pages, the link right now might just be a pound sign, meaning you're going to link to that page, and eventually you build the pages. I'm doing that with the first-year people. We're going through this Joe's Pizza site, and we've been working on that. So the same kind of thing. But what they're saying here is, again, I'm not going to read it, but again, remember the fact that we're working with a database, so the act of doing this is a little bit different. The author says, first you must create containers to hold your content. The containers are categories. You can make as many categories as you want. You can have categories under categories, etc. And notice you've got categories, and categories hold articles. All right, so they have you walk through this, and the first thing they have you do here is to come in and create a news category. Some of the stuff, if you've gone through this, all right, it's going to look a little, I wouldn't do it like that, and that's fine. In fact, it might not be a bad idea as you're working through the exercise that is this book to say, okay, if I was doing my own site, I'd do this, or I'd do this. That way, when we get to where we're done with the book and you're working on your own site, then you've got some notes and something to be thinking about. And along with that, again, I hope you're actually thinking about that right now. The fact is, again, hopefully somewhere around week 10 to week 12, somewhere in there, all right, we'll be done with the book. You'll be working on your own site. You're going to have to literally give me a list of requirements. I don't care if you do it in PowerPoint and you make some screenshots. I don't care if you know any wireframe tools and you mock something up. I don't care how you do it. All right, but I'll want something that has some basic requirements of what you're going to do for your site. All right, and again, that's not to say that over time that can't change. You might say, well, you know, I had this page, I really don't need it, but I need these 2 pages, fine. But at least I want some kind of an idea of what it is you're doing. All right? And if this works out as well as I hope it works out, this is something we'll be able to use next semester also in the design and implementation projects class. All right? So, as they say here, when you go through this stuff, you go to Content, Category Manager, and you click on the New button. And again, there's shortcuts also if you want to do that. All right, the Category Manager, add a new articles categories opens, put the title in there. Notice what it says. Don't worry about the other fields. You can leave them empty right now. Quite often what you're going to find is if there is an alias field like this, if you leave it blank, Joomla will fill it in for you. Now, quite often it'll fill it in with the same thing that's in the title. Not always, but pretty much so. That's the way it's going to be. But what they're saying is you might as well just leave it blank. Okay, unless you want something customized in there. Now, again, we talked about these earlier. I'm taking for granted that you all know the difference between save, save and close, and save and new. All right, so they tell you to do a save and close because basically you're done. All right, if you've gone through and done everything they told you to do, we looked at this last time, the only category that you had in there was uncategorized. And again, remember that uncategorized is used literally for that. You don't, it's for stuff that doesn't belong in any category. It's the equivalent of, instead of calling it uncategorized, of calling it like miscellaneous. And that's basically what it is. All right, so now you've added that news category if you've gone through those steps. All right, so the next thing they say here is to create articles using images and link fields. And this actually will work fine, I think, for you to do it yourselves, and I can walk around, Mike can walk around, whatever, if you've got problems with it. But I think that you will have no problem doing this yourselves. What my hope is not by the end of today, I'll figure out what this problem is with mine, then I'll retape the lecture, and I'll go through everything. I'll walk through the steps that I did to do this. Like I said, right now, to me, it's going to be a cluster. If I keep clicking the wrong menu item, and I'm, not only that, I'm always afraid when I do that. You don't realize this, but back in the day when before the semester started, I used to tape a lot of lectures at home, and they were out there by the time, bless you, by the time the semester started. One of the reasons I stopped doing that was when I'd get frustrated, all right, there would be swear words on there. And I'd have to go and cut those things out when I did that. And sometimes, then I go back and I have to listen. I'd have to know about where it happened, and then I have to listen and make sure I cut the swear word out. And if it didn't get cut out, and I tried and it didn't work, all right, then I had to retape it. And I just got tired of doing that. And I also had students complaining. I found this amazing. They were coming into class at the beginning of the semester, and I'd have 20 lectures out there. And I had one guy who literally wrote a letter to my boss and to her boss complaining, saying, this is unprofessional. He's drinking soda while he's doing lectures. I can hear him opening soda up, type of thing. His dog runs down sometimes. So I thought, I'm putting all this extra time on here doing this, and people are complaining anyway. So pardon my French, but I just said, screw it. It really and truly isn't worth it. So I said, I'm not going to do any more of these lectures at all. My wife likes that because I was probably spending, the equivalent of 2 of my weeks of vacation just doing lectures. And I'm not doing it anymore. So they come through here and they have you create an article in the news category. Again, just follow the steps. Content article manager, add new article. All right. In the title box, they tell you what to put in there. In the category, make sure you select news. Why? Because that's where you want it to go, is in the news category. All right. It says in the editor screen, write the article. They use the lipsum.com. Now notice it says here when you do that and you bring it out, again, just so you're aware of this, I mentioned this last week sometime, but we're going to see this in a later chapter when we talk about extensions. The editor that you are given with Joomla is an editor that's called TinyMCE. All right, it's used for a lot of different things. It's somewhat limited in what you can do. What the author has you do in a later chapter is the author has you come in and add a different editor that more or less is more Joomla specific. All right, if you don't like that editor and you want to go and do that stuff right now, and change it, you can. I just suggest, because the steps and etc. that they have you do in here, all right, they base it off of that editor. So it says to divide an article into an intro text and a main paragraph. So what they're supposing is you've got around 4 paragraphs of text, somewhere around that. So the author says that typically what you want is just to show a paragraph and then have a more link. So as he mentions right there, position the cursor at the beginning of the first line below the first paragraph, and it says on the bottom of your editor screen there's a button that says read more. When you do that, you're going to literally see like a dashed line, a red dotted line that'll appear there. Other than that, it'll look the same. All right, but after you go through these steps and you save it, then what you're going to notice, so it'll look like that, the red dashed lines, but when you go back in, come on. Well, I thought it should. There it is. It'll have the read more right there. It'll only have a paragraph. All right? So that's what they're expecting you to do. All right? Again, what I'm looking for as you're going through this is not that yours looks just like it does in the book. Not at all. But that you've done this. What I don't want to have happen is, we're halfway through the semester or 2/3 of the way through, and now you're supposed to be working on your own project, and you go, I don't know how to do any of this stuff. Because you're going to go back and create a new site in a very similar way that you're creating this site right now. All right, you're going to have your choice. You're going to either be able to literally remove all this content from Corba when you get done and replace it with your own, or you can take all this content for Corba and basically just hide it and then put in your own. So you'll be able to do one or the other. So again, they have you create the article, and then as the author says, finally we'll add an image. All right. There's a couple different ways that you can add images, and they have you actually do both of them in this chapter. So as the author says, below the article editor screen, you'll notice there is an images and links section. All right. So they ask you to do that. They ask you to select, to do this. You click select in the intro image field, a pop-up appears. All right. And what they want you to do, you can pick out any one you want. All right. They want you to navigate, and you'll see this. There is a sample data folder that's in there. And under the sample data folder, there is a parks folder. And under the parks folder, there's a landscape folder. So this picture that they've used here, when I did this last summer, that's the one that I used. I went and looked for it. It's one of the ones that's in there. All right. as it says, in the image float, which is going to be one of the options in there, click on the left to make the image go on the left-hand side. All right, then click on Insert. All right. Now, when you do that, if you haven't seen this particular type of screen before, you'll see it then. And once you've set it up where you actually have an image in here and you put your mouse and you put it over the eye, it'll actually show you the image that you're going to use. All right. Is that a big thing? No, but the same kind of thing would have worked if you went through the steps and you put in your image for the logo. The same kind of thing will happen. You get the eye in the same way. All right. So it says repeat the previous 2 steps to add a full article image. So what they want you to add first, again in here, is this particular image here should be the thumbnail version of it. But when you click the read more, it should bring in the full version. Does that all make sense? All right. If you follow the steps, if it doesn't make sense, if you follow the steps, that's exactly what's going to happen. All right. So, as it says, although the image will be shown on the front end, it isn't visible on the back end yet. All right. To do that, as it says, point your cursor at the intro image field, which will display the thumbnail. I'm going to repeat that. So that's what it'll look like for right now, not like real much. All right. So as they mentioned there, when you get done, this is what your screen should look like. All right. And they've got all the settings here. So again, notice the intro image, that's the small one. That's the thumbnail one. All right. You've got that to the left, and you've got the full one to the right. What you'll notice when you get into that images folder is there'll be 2 of them. If you mouse over them, I don't remember if it's done by size or what, but if you mouse over them, you'll be able to tell right away which is the thumbnail and which is the big one. It's really, really, truly not a hard process to do. All right. Then, as it says, click on Save and Close. You're taken to the Article Manager screen, and it shows you what you're going to have underneath there. All right. Again, the new article is ready, but if you click the View Site now, you might be disappointed. There's no sign of the new article. Remember the way that this works. After you've gone through all that stuff, you have to add a menu link to actually have something to click to make it show. So that's what they're going to have you do next. All right. Again, if you're following along or trying to, all right, I'm on page 88. All right. Again, the author explains what just happened. I just did the same. All right. So, as the author says, when you add images to articles, it's not just images and links. There's also an image button on the bottom of the screen. So what the author does is mention that there's 2 ways of doing the same thing. Quite often what you'll find in this software is there are 2 ways of doing the same thing. At least. Sometimes there's more than that. You know, the first year people, I had a guy come up to me yesterday and he was all excited and he goes, hey, you know, you showed us how to do this? In class I said, yeah. And he goes, did you know there's another way of doing it? And he showed it to me and I said, yeah, well, that's good. You know, and I'm glad that he went out and figured that in his own way. But if I spend time showing you how to do the same thing 6 times, all right, you'd learn how to do that thing real well, but then you wouldn't learn how to do other things. All right. The bottom line is there's different ways that you can add images. Try them both. See which one seems to make more sense to you, and I'd recommend you use that one. All right. You're going to have the same result, but it's just 2 different ways of getting to the same result. All right. So on page 89, they show you how to create the menu link. And it's on pages 89, 90, and 91. So by now, hopefully this, I'm not going to say it's second nature, but it shouldn't be that difficult to go to menus, main menu, add new menu item. All right. And as it says, click on the select button and select articles. All right. And choose a category. It'll be news. And as it says there in the main title field, type news and click save. So what are you doing? What you're doing is you're making sure now in that news menu item that you have, once you click that, what that's going to do is it's going to automatically open up that article that they just asked you to put in there. All right. And I believe we'll put some more in after that, but by default, not only will it put all of them in there, but it'll put them in there any way you want. So you have your choice, and as you go through the chapter, you'll see this when you're laying out stuff. And what I mean is, it's up to you. You can sit there and say, I want 1 article at the top of the page, kind of be my feature article. And I want 3 more down below. And I want 3 more, and I want them lined up right after one another. And that's just setting up your rows and columns in there. You can do that. Or you might say, I want one at the top, and I want, rather than stacking 3 side by side, I want 3, but I want them right underneath one another. You can do that too. And you can set up, when you create this stuff, how many rows you want, how many columns you want, etc. This is all walked through the book. All right? So, as it says, creating just one link changes a lot on the front end. All right, it says the home page is still empty, but now you should have that news link. All right? So when you click on it, this is what's going to happen. It says what's going to happen is you are shown a category blog page, which is an overview of the article, this stuff that's in here. All right? For now, there's just the one article, etc., so it runs through that stuff. When the user clicks the Read More link, you're taken to the full article. So again, that's the thumbnail. That'll be the full article. All right? And what I was doing before class, too, is I was coming in here and just playing around with this stuff. I've done this before just to see if it broke anything, and it didn't. So I want you to understand something. This isn't in your book, and what I'm going to tell you right now, when I get done, you might think, I wish you wouldn't have even told us that, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. And that is, if I click on computer, go to the C drive, go to XAMPP, go to htdocs, go to Joomla, and go to where I've got, so this is my site right here. But if I dig through here, you'll notice there's images. There's sample data. There's parks. There's landscape. Does that look familiar? That's the same stuff they're showing you in the book. What I have tried to do is to go out and grab other images and literally just drag them into this folder. See what I'm saying? So I had other images to choose from. The author recommends that when you do that, you don't do it like this. You actually use a product like FileZilla and you FTP them over. I wanted to see what would happen if I literally just threw them in there. Okay? And I've done it twice. The first time I did it, it worked fine. I was able to throw different images in here. The second time I did it, and I'm not sure why, it put them in, but it didn't put them in this folder. It put them up at the top of the hierarchy here, so it put it right under my images. See what I'm saying? It didn't put it under images, sample data, parks, landscape. It just put it under images. All right? And when I tried to go back in and then move it again, it still didn't move it there. It kept it right there. And I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense or not, but all that meant was when I was telling it to find an image, instead of having it go to images, sample data, parks, landscape, I just went under images. I was still able to add it, but I wasn't able to put it in here. Not sure why. It worked the first time I tried it at home, but it didn't work here. All right, but since then I did an uninstall on that one. All right, so I don't know what the difference is between the two, but there must have been something. All right. It says now that's the all-important power of menus. Again, we've talked about this a little bit before. I just want to mention it one more time. This thing in many ways is menu-based. As it says, just by adding a menu link, you make your content accessible in several ways. Not only that, as you're working through here, what you're going to see, it's up to you. All right, you can make your content accessible by just having your main menu links with submenus underneath them at the top in like a navigation bar area, or you can have them run along the side, or you can have them do both. And they'll have you do a lot of both as you're going through the book here. So there'll be more than one way to access the same thing. So the next thing to come in there and do is to create some more. On page 92, the author talks about creating some more categories and then some more articles. So if you've gone up till this point, you've created the uncategorized, and you've created the news. The news has one article in it. Then they want you to follow the same steps and create a club meetings and create an art lectures. All right, so you'll create those categories and you'll add some articles underneath there. So the idea is that when you get done and you've added the menu links, that when you look in here, it's going to show you uncategorized, news, and the other ones that they just told you to add here. All right? I should go forward, not backward. But they have you run through the same exact steps that you just used. All right? For the club meetings, again, I don't believe these pictures are in there. They could be, but I didn't see them in there. That's why I went out and when I told you, I Googled bad art and I was manually adding the stuff. All right. And I was able to put a bunch of that stuff in there. Not those pictures, but I found some other ones online. All right. And I told you this before too, just so you know, some of the stuff that I added from online, I had to go and customize the size, because the size of the pings or you know, etc., were like 1,000 by 1,000, which was just, I wouldn't need that. So I used make a thumbnail, and I created thumbnails at 100 by 100 and used those. All right. And also then I went back in and just made it like 300 by 300. Make a thumbnail allows you to make like 100 by 100, 150 by 150, 200 by 200, 250 by 250, and 300 by 300. I think those are the ones. There is a way to customize. I haven't played with that enough. All right. So I did that. And did mine look exactly like this? No, I got it to look fairly close. All right. The other thing too to realize, all right, is notice as you set this up, this is what the author's doing. There is a main article here, so that's just taking up 2 columns, all right? And there's 2 articles down here that are taking up 2 columns. So if you're following the author's steps and you don't like the way it looks, then change it. I don't care. I want you to run through the steps and the stuff that's in here. I could care less one way or the other if yours looks the way this does, really. But I want you to have run through the steps that are in the book. That's what matters to me. All right. So then they come back and they talk about the uncategorized. Okay. So we're up to page 97 here. And as it says here, let's create a mission statement. Well, again, a mission statement is the kind of thing, 2 things. First of all, probably doesn't belong with anything else. That's the first thing. So the author puts it under uncategorized. And it's either in this chapter or in a later chapter. I don't remember. The author even says, let's not even put it under uncategorized. Let's put a menu link to it and put it only on the front page. Probably if somebody is going to look at the mission statement, there really probably isn't a need to put it on every page. All right, so the author will just put it on the front page. All right. So what he has you do there is, you know, literally go back to Content Article Manager. For the title is mission statement. The category dropdown is uncategorized, and they have you put in the code or the paragraph that you see down starting at the bottom of 97 and going up to the top of 98. All right, so it's like 3 paragraphs. Do a save and close, go to the menu manager and add a new menu item. All right, so it's going to be in there. When you do this, if you take a look, notice what it says on step 6. It says in the menu manager, new menu item screen, we'll create a link to it. Let's select the appropriate menu type, and that's what this is. It is just a single article. You'll see that when you get through here, but there's a lot to choose from. All right. So that's what's going to be down here. As it says, uncategorized is a perfect place to put content in your site that doesn't fit in any category. So we already have home. We created news in the first part of the exercise. We created art lectures and club meetings in the second part. Then they have you create the mission statement in the last part. So when you get done and you click on that, basically that's what's going to come up. All right. Then the author says, take a look at what's in here. You've got home, then you've got news, then you've got art lectures, etc., and then you've got mission statements. One of the things that we're going to add at a later time, not in this chapter, but in a later chapter, will be archives. So if somebody wants to go back and look at news from years past or a site, you know, and go look through an audit trail, probably archives would appear down near the bottom. All right. But what the author gets to here is you've got control over, when you set this up, the menu that's over here is going to be in the order in which you add the options to the menu. Hopefully that just makes sense. All right. But if you don't like that order, you can change it. So the author next, starting on page 100 here, shows you how you can change the order of the menu options. All right. So notice what it says. You've noticed that they're all shown in the order in which they've been created. The last 2 that we just added are displayed at the bottom of the menu. You can change the order very easily by navigating to menus, main menu, and then when you do, it says clicking on the 3 vertical dots to the left-hand side of any article. Those dots that are right here. And it says once you do that, it's going to give you the little, not a hand, but the little, whatever this thing is right here. And you've seen that kind of thing before. Then you can click, hold down on it, and drag it up and down and change its order. All right? So that's what the author has you do. He has you move the mission statement up from the bottom to number 2. Again, I don't care whether you leave it in the order it was in or whether you put it in the order the author shows or whatever. All right, you put it in your own order. It doesn't matter, but you should at least try it. So again, so you get the idea of moving the stuff around. All right. So finally, the author says, okay, we've done all that. And on page 101, he says, you know what, this may seem almost like we did this ass backwards, because they said, you know, we haven't added anything to the home page. There isn't really any content that's there that we've added. Its main content area is still empty. And as he says there, it might seem strange to do that, but quite often on a, quote, regular website, unquote, you do that also. And there's actually a really good reason, I think, for possibly on a website doing the home page last. Anybody have any idea why that might be a good reason? Well, that's part of it, yeah. So you know because you've done the rest of it. But to me, an even more fundamental reason is if you do the main page first, then what you're doing is you're letting the main page gauge the way the rest of the site looks. And that's not typically what you want to have happen. You want to do the site and then build the main page around the site. All right? But what happens is people kind of get shoehorned into an idea. They create a main page. It's got everything I want, and then everything else has got to follow in line based off of that. I think that by creating the main page, this is me, you may not agree with this, but by creating that home page first, you're stifling a lot of your creativity. All right? And I believe that's the way the author feels. All right? And I think that's why he's showing it and having you do it this way. All right. It says, the author says here, however, you do not need to have actual content before you start publishing anything on your home page. After all, the home page is a selection of content items. Well, what's the home page? The author is basically saying, in an ideal world, the home page is going to be a way to have users look through the site, right? It's your startup page. It's your jumping off point for people who are going to be using the site. All right, so the author is saying there, you know, you want to entice people and you want to let them stay there. So he talks about adding items, should look familiar by now, content, article manager, new, etc. And he says, again, another way of doing it is the shortcut, but he has you come in there and add a couple articles to the home page via the article manager. All right. Now, one thing on this, and it's in here, it's in this chapter someplace, but I don't remember exactly where. If you decide, you know, I think I've done enough work with this, that what I'd almost rather do would be to just grab something that I created on another page, you know, highlight it and just copy it to the front page, for example. You can do that. All right. You can copy articles and you can move them around. It's in the chapter here. Like I said, I'm going to have to go back once I hopefully get this thing to work where it looks fine on my screen. And if I have to, I'll redo the whole frigging chapter. I don't care. All right. But I won't do it as one lecture, but I'll do it as 2 or 3. But again, as it says, they have you come in here and assign some articles to the home page. The other thing that you can do too is you can take articles, if you decide that some of this stuff that we did before, some of this stuff, you know what, I think it really belongs on the home page. You can go in there and under the categories, you can change it from where it was. You can set it to the home page. You can do that too. All right, so there's a lot of ways that this can be done. So the author here, starting on the bottom of page 101, shows you how to add items to the home page and walks you through again step by step. All right. All right, then finally step 3. All right. So in the first step, we got rid of the stuff that was in our existing layout. All right. In our second step, we started to add some categories. All right, and we put articles in those categories. In step 3 right here, as it says, starting here on page 104, and there's just a few more pages, 5 to 10 pages left in the chapter, something like that, is the author talks about adding extras through extensions. All right, and as it says there, when you work with it, you'll find you're working with components and extensions. It says components are really extensions too. What's an extension? It's just that. In some languages, they're referred to as plugins. All right, and WordPress, they refer to them as plugins. And you actually have in WordPress a plugin manager where you can go out there and grab stuff that's either from the net, all right, or that's out there that's provided by WordPress. And it's the same way here. If there's something that you want, so let's just say that John decided that he wanted a calendar on his front page for whatever reason. All right, I would say before you go and create it yourself, go in there and Google Joomla extensions and look in there for a calendar. There's probably one that is very similar to what you want, and many of them are customizable. once you put them in there. All right. So again, rather than reinventing the wheel all the time. All right. So as it says, behind the scenes, basically, whether you're talking about extensions or modules, they're doing the same thing. They want to enhance a site's functionality. So the last thing they have you do in here is build a contact form. Again, it is very simplistic. If you decide you don't like what they've done and you want to add some stuff, because he has you add almost nothing to this form, then add something. You can always go back and edit it later if you don't like the way it looks and remove it, change it around or do whatever. So as it says, you go to Components, Contacts, which will open up the Content Manager. These are what you put in here. All right. Again, it'll be an uncategorized. It doesn't make sense for contact. It doesn't fit in the news or whatever. It says there, click the Content Details tab and fill out the information. He suggests that for right now, just fill out the email and the phone number. All right. If you decide, no, that's not enough, I want more in there. He also says put in a generic. What this is going to be is you're going to have a contact form. So if people have questions, they'll be able to go, it'll bring up the form and they can put in stuff. And by default now, it's going to go to Corba staff at whatever email address you put in there. So you should be able to try this, put in your own email address. Once you get it done, fill out something in the contact form, send it, and see if indeed you get it, whether you use your school's email address or something else. All right. So they walk you through the steps on doing that here and creating the contact form link. All right. Again, it is just walking through all the steps. And again, I apologize for the way I'm doing this. But that's what's going to happen. It's a very vanilla, very generic looking contact form. And at the bottom, although it doesn't show it, there'll be a submit button on there. Okay, so you fill in all the goodies here, and you click the submit button, and ideally, then whatever you ended up doing will be sent to whatever email you set up in here. Does that make sense? Your Corba staff, in other words. All right. Again, he explains what happens. Okay, then finally he says, well, if you've gone through this, you've got this stuff at the top, which, again, I mentioned this before, you may or may not want. So he talks about cleaning up the top menu, and you can remove that stuff. You can add more stuff. As I mentioned earlier, if you look at your screen as being a big square, sometimes you'll see the navigation links on the top, running horizontally on the top. Sometimes you'll see menu items running vertically down, typically the right side, but you can put them anywhere you want. You can have either or both, depending on what you want your site to look like. And again, sometimes what that'll be too is it'll depend on the sophistication of the person using the site. If I was making a site for younger people, they'll catch on fast, but when they're first doing it, they probably won't read things. They've done studies on stuff like that typically older people, it usually takes them longer to get, basically acclimated to something, but one of the reasons for that is they like to read their way through it, make sure before they start doing it, they really know what's going on. Younger people like to click and see what happens. All right. So the last thing that they do have you add in here, starting on page 108, is this message block. What it'll be is this. They want you to basically add an image that's got BAM on it for whatever reason. Get your tickets now, call this, and when you run through the steps that are in there, all right, they tell you where to position it. And again, notice it says position right, position 7. Don't just choose position 7, choose right position 7. We're going in a later chapter, we're going to go over what all those positions are and how you can find out exactly where things are. All right. But if you do that and you run through the steps right here, again, you're brought into the editor, you do all that stuff, and the idea is that's where you'll put it. All right. So people will see that at the top. And again, that's the kind of thing, visit the Bad Art Museum. Okay. It says get your tickets now. That might stay up there for a long time. That might stay up there for a week. You might decide where it says visit the Bad Art Museum that you want either the image or the text here. You might want that to be hyperlinked. All right, where eventually if you're going to be able to push them off to where they can buy tickets type of thing. All right, so there's a lot of different ways that this can happen, in other words. So if you've gone through all the steps, ideally what you're going to have is an article at the top, 3 articles running down the side, this little image here with the code that goes, not the code, but with the text that goes with it, Simple menu right here. All right. The login form at the bottom. All right. And if you run through and you do all that, basically you've run through what's in the chapter. All right. The author does mention here, you can go to System, Global Configuration, and in the site setting, enter the site name, as it says, bless you. In the SEO settings, include the site name page. So again, as it says, what we're trying to do here, because that is it for the chapter, is to do some search engine optimization. All right. So I walked through that quick. It may or may not have seemed quick. It seemed like eternity to me. But I don't like that when I've got a book that's visual and I've got to do everything more or less textual. I don't want to do that. So again, if I can get this fixed, I'm going to, I make you the promise that by the time you get in here next week on Tuesday, as long as mine's working, you'll have all the updated lectures. All right. I don't know if I'll redo the first one because everything worked up till that point. So when we were up to like page 81, I don't see the need to redo that, but I'll redo all the rest of it. All right. So what we'll do, if we get to that point and everybody gets done, I'll ask before we start next Tuesday. And if people need a little bit more time or you need the first half of the period on Tuesday to catch up or I need it, that's fine. Then we'll go into Chapter 5. Notice Chapter 5, which starts on page 113, small sites, big sites, organizing your content effectively. So as it says, we'll translate a basic site map into a blueprint for the site, design a clearer, scalable framework for the content, and use uncategorized pages to build sites that don't require multi-level content. They'll keep working with the site. They'll constantly be adding pages, removing pages, updating pages, moving pages around. So you're going to see that. All right, so the site that you create in Chapter 3 will look different than the site that you're creating in Chapter 4, which will look different than the site you're creating in Chapter 5, etc. All right? Okay, that's all that I had then.